Hi, welcome to HowtoDandD. My name is Fred Wheeler and today I want to talk about Dungeons & Dragons 5e. And this is yet again one of those Lost Mine of Phandelver Dungeon Master guides. So if you're not aware and you're watching this, it is going to be absolutely jam-packed with spoilers. So if you're a player playing in this adventure, I don't recommend jumping in and listening to what I have to say, because I will spoil a lot of what you are going to wind up playing at some point. So you've been playing the Lost Mine of Phandelver, you've finished running the game, you're the Dungeon Master, and after the conclusion of the Lost Mine of Phandelver, you've wrapped everything up, but there are a few troublesome consequences to managing the Lost Mine of Phandelver. And what I want to do is I want to break them down bit by bit. I'm going to deal with two of the most common ones that people ask me, and I will absolutely talk about the Forge of Spells. Okay, we're definitely going to talk about that, but I'm leaving that to the end because it's complicated compared to the rest of the other stuff I want to talk about. So let us start off with, what is the deal? Okay, we've got a whole lot of different things we need to contend with. We've got an adventure which is actually pretty good, but there, as I said, there are some troublesome aspects to it. And one of those starts with literally the conclusion. I think it's on page 51. The conclusion talks about the party getting a percentage share from the mine's profits. So provided everything goes well and the Rockseeker brothers are saved, those two that are still alive, Gundren and Nundro, they are going to open up and run the mine at Wave Echo Cave. And because the players' characters have been involved, they get a share of the profits. It says 10% share of the mine's profits. What it doesn't say is how much profit the mine turns over. So what are the designers thinking when they did this? Well, honestly, I think what they were intending was they were going to leave it to you as the Dungeon Master to decide what that number or figure would be. Some Dungeon Masters would allocate more, and some Dungeon Masters would allocate less. And some Dungeon Masters might decide that the mine is mined out fairly quickly or has a regular sort of income coming out of it for quite some time. So I think really the designers were leaving it up to you to decide how to manage that, which is why there isn't any significant details on how much money the mine actually makes. So now that we've dealt with that part of it, what money do the characters actually get? Well, I would say right now, does it really matter? Because what are they going to buy with that money, even if you do give them money from the mine, a 10% share? They're going to buy what? Healing potions? Probably a good idea. I suppose they could buy a huge quantity of them so they never run out. They could go and buy that fancy armor, that plate armor that they've always wanted, that they couldn't quite get enough funding for as they were playing the Lost Mine of Phandelver. Maybe they'll finally be able to afford it. Maybe they'll have some backup armor and they'll buy several pairs and one will stay at home. Maybe they will buy a cottage. Maybe they will open up a tavern or an inn. Maybe they will just drink it all away. Honestly, I don't think it really matters the value or the amount of money you allocate to them for that particular task. You could really just pick any kind of number and it probably would be perfectly fine. Now, I realize that that is not the answer that people wanted from me, so I am going to give you a definitive answer. That's my opinion and suggestion. It is just a suggestion and nothing else. It is not set in concrete. It is not written in the adventure itself. And my suggestion is, look in the Dungeon Master's Guide. And there is a treasure hoard value section for challenge levels. Now, I would look at challenge level 5 to 10. You could look at the lower level if you wanted to. And usually at the top of that chart, there is a sort of an indication of how much gold value would be held in a treasure hoard, not an individual sort of treasure looting experience, but a treasure hoard. So I would consider something like the mine like a treasure hoard with a regular income. So what I would suggest is allocate the players per month, or you can set up a different time frame, it's up to you, and give them 700 copper pieces, 7,000 silver pieces, 2,100 gold pieces, and 105 platinum pieces, which they have to share amongst themselves, and that is their 10% share of the actual mining operation. And that value won't increase. In fact, you can probably make that value decrease over time as the mine is churning up and using up the funds and the materials and the wealth that's inside. Okay, so that's what I would suggest. Now, it doesn't have to be presented in coins. It could be presented in something like gems or ore or something like that. Anything that you think would make sense that would be coming out of a mine. So that would be the first thing. This is probably the most common question that I get, is how much is 10% on the mine's share of profit? Okay, so I've covered that question. Another question that tends to come up, and often it's overlooked, but not all people tend to overlook it, and that is that mystery map, the mysterious map that they can discover. Now, they're not always going to find this map. Sometimes they won't find it, but there is a mysterious map within the adventure, and it's found in Area 14 of Wave Echo Cave. It doesn't actually state very much about the actual map itself. That's why it's mysterious. It's really leaving it open-ended for you. So what does the map, that mysterious map found in Area 14 of Wave Echo Cave, where does it lead? Well, it's opening it up completely to you, and it actually states there's a little bit of guidance about what to do with the mysterious map. Maybe it's the entrance to the next adventure location or dungeon that they will be exploring, or could explore should they decide to do so. And I've actually already done a video on the next adventure you can run after the Lost Mine of Phandelver, so I would suggest going and checking that out. Don't want to go over that in great detail right now, because I've already talked about that topic quite a lot. So check that out, and that'll probably give you a good idea what you can make that map sort of lead to. It might be the entrance to the next adventure, it might be the actual adventure dungeon that they can explore, and they have the entire map already readily available to them. But that's my suggestion. Also too, the characters might not even find the map. It's possible they won't ever discover it. And if they don't ever discover it, then you won't ever have to worry about that sort of problem and what to do with the map. Okay? It can also be a map that leads them to a location that they could use as their next headquarters or home. It might be an old manor, it might be an old castle, it might be something that's underground. It's up to you. So completely up to you as the Dungeon Master. I've provided you with a couple of sort of suggestions, okay? So that's number 2 in terms of troublesome consequences for the Lost Mine of Phandelver. The next one that tends to come up, and that is Phandalin itself. Phandalin is a great location, and the intention of Phandalin is to give the characters a base of operations. But when the characters are now level 5, or at least close to it, and you wrap up, Phandalin is just not big enough anymore. They have really outgrown the location Phandalin. They've already had adventures around Phandalin, and it's been milked to death. We've already had multiple small adventures and side quests and major story arcs all around Phandalin. So you might find that the players, do they really need more of it? Do they want more of it? Is it just going to be something that frustrates them? Because it's Dungeons and Dragons. You have introduced them to a sandbox environment. They've got to explore around Phandalin itself, and the chances are that they're going to go exploring. You've presented them with a world. They know it's bigger than just Phandalin. They're going to want to leave Phandalin and go and explore the world, whether that be the Sword Coast or the whole region of Faerun. Who knows? Look, even the NPCs will offer only minor interest and utility to the player's characters because they've already done that stuff. So what do you do with that? My suggestion to you is don't get tied to Phandalin. Let them explore the world. Let them go somewhere else. It's there. There's plenty of material. Wizards of the Coast has pumped out a whole bunch of adventures that you can use. They've got maps out there. There's lots of information on Forgotten Realms. And, you know, maybe this is time for them to start exploring a place other than the Forgotten Realms and do a bit of planar travel. Planar travel at level 5 is probably a little bit too early, but, you know, maybe they go somewhere else, whether it be underground into the Underdark, whether you go somewhere else completely different. It's up to you. Just a suggestion. Okay, so the next issue that tends to crop up, and that is the mine itself. The mine itself is a problem, and the reason being is that Phandalin and the mine at Wave Echo Cave will draw a lot of heat from claim jumpers or powerful individuals or organisations that will want the wealth that's coming out of it. Not to mention, if it's probably only going to be a matter of time before they discover that the Forge of Spells is there and it still operates. It may not be working at full capacity, but they won't necessarily know that, and will they even care? Okay, so what do you do with the fact that all this heat is probably now going to be presented to a little old mine and Phandalin region? What can you do with that? My suggestion to you is you can do whatever you want. Whatever you find interesting, whatever your players find interesting, just go with it. Do something that works for you. There's lots of different ways of doing this. It's a good way to introduce new villains or even an old villain or foes for the party by having them pursue the mine itself for its value and for the Forge of Spells that's situated within. The Rockseeker brothers are also going to find themselves in a situation in terms of its management that they are going to have to spend a bit of money to increase the budget for security for the mine. Otherwise, it's going to wind up being taken over by somebody else. And the only way that they won't have to spend more money on security, and probably quite a large force, is if the players' characters spend 24 hours a day, every single day, situated at the mine to make sure nobody takes over the mine and takes it off the Rockseeker brothers. It's not like the Rockseeker brothers are going to be able to fight off hordes of claim jumpers and other organisations that are better equipped than they are to actually engage in any kind of warfare or combat. So make sure that when you are adjusting your adventure and dishing out money, that you make it clear that the Lost Mine of Phandelver, that mine and that adventure is now got a lot of heat on it. There's going to be a lot of interested parties, which we are going to talk about as I go, and that they are going to find themselves having to take a smaller profit margin because they have to buy or hire, whether it be troops, guards, sentries, whatever, to protect the mine, to make sure that it doesn't wind up getting taken over by somebody else. And they're probably going to have to pay well, otherwise they won't do a very good job. Gets very complicated, doesn't it? Also too, remember that Phandalin's population will most likely grow larger and change in its nature, and the types of people who live there will change. So instead of being a small town, it's probably going to turn into a large town, and provided that the wealth keeps coming through, it might even turn into a small city. Something to bear in mind when you're looking at how to sort of progress from here. Now there is a character that pops up, it's the main villain. What happens if Nesna is captured and not killed by the player's characters? It's entirely possible that Nesna will not get killed, and you might have a party who decides that, no, we feel like that's too much, and what we're going to do instead is capture, hold Nesna the Black Spider for interrogation, and pass over to the authorities. So what do you do with Nesna if Nesna gets captured? Well, fortunately, it does spell out in the adventure on page 50 under developments what you need to do. And I'll read really briefly from it, but then I will talk to those points, okay? If Nesna is captured, he is delivered to the town master's hall in Phandelver, and the drow is locked up by Sildar Hallwinter or some other representative of the Lord's Alliance. He will then be escorted from Phandelver to Neverwinter to face justice and interrogation. Now that's all fine, but it then states that if there isn't sufficient guards posted on Nesna, that a particular individual who owns the mine exchange, and this is I think it's Halia Thornton. Halia Thornton is going to arrange a jailbreak for Nesna, smuggle him out of Phandelver, and deliver him into the waiting hands of the Zentarum, probably for a pretty nice fee. What the Zentarum do with him after that, chances are they will want to know what's going on with Wave Echo Cave, the mine, the Forge of Spells, and also take over the operations of the Red Brands, if there's any Red Brands left, that is. So that really does complicate things quite a bit, doesn't it? So if Hildar Thornton does break Nesna out of jail, it means that the players are going to have to make sure they post guards on him and escort him to Neverwinter to guarantee that he doesn't wind up getting broken out. Because the chances are, as a dungeon master, most dungeon masters will be thinking, well, the players' characters are probably the only ones powerful enough to actually stop somebody doing this, and if they start hiring somebody to do the job for them, it's an open season to let Nesna come back into the game, or at least be broken out and rescued in some way. So that's part of the complications that you might have to face, and your players will certainly find that frustrating if they haven't posted guards and suddenly Nesna does escape. Now, it's not always going to happen this way. Chances are that Nesna might get killed anyway by the players' characters and you never have to deal with this. But doesn't mean that it might not happen, okay? It certainly could happen. What happens if Nesna is killed by the Zentarum after being interrogated? They might interrogate him and kill him. They might interrogate him and keep him alive and lock him up somewhere. They might interrogate him and send him off on a mission of their own. The Zentarum are very sort of grey in terms of their view of what people do. So if they can find a use for Nesna, they might still utilise him later on. Nesna might not actually make it to the Zentarum. Okay, he might not be rescued. Sildar Hallwinter might actually get him to Neverwinter courts, where he is tried, executed, or imprisoned. All of that is possible. But the point is that Nesna might reappear as a villain later on in your campaign, dependent on what the players do and how you have your NPCs interact with that whole dynamic. And even if Nesna is killed or dies at the hands of the Zentarum or the players' characters or Neverwinter courts and the justice system, it's still possible, provided there's enough of his body and there's somebody wealthy enough, that they could bring him back to life by raising him from the dead or using something like resurrection. It's probably going to feel a little bit sour to players who find this sort of situation cropping up in their game, but it's certainly an option for you as a dungeon master if you think that will add something to your adventure and your campaign. Okay, we've talked about the Zentarum, but so what happens to Phandelver if the Zentarum take an interest in the Rock Seeker's mine? This can get really complicated because the Zentarum are far more powerful and certainly more than a match for characters who are level 5, and they can continue to be a force to be reckoned with no matter what the characters' levels are. As it happens, they could be quite a sticky fish to deal with. The characters could be marked for death by the Zentarum for interfering with their business. If they have managed to discover and stop Halia Thornton's plans and her intention to take over the Red Brands or rescue Nesna, then it's possible that they might put a price on the players' heads and try and have them done away with. All of which makes the continuation of your adventure quite a lot more complicated. But what it does do is it gives you a whole lot of meat that you can use to extend your Lost Mine of Phandelver campaign onward if you wanted to. I didn't actually want to discuss a lot of this detail in what's the next adventure after the Lost Mine of Phandelver, because this requires you to do, as a dungeon master, a lot of work. You will actually have to write some material, come up with some ideas, and generally sort of hash through things. So that's the Zentarum. Okay, another major threat that you may not have considered that could still be around, and that is Venom Fang. Venom Fang is the green dragon. Now, if he survives, he manages to fight off the player's characters and lives, or they never go to actually deal with Venom Fang, then Venom Fang's still around. What happens now? Now, Venom Fang can be found at the ruins of Thunder Tree, and that's his lair. That's the place that he resides. He's in location 7, but he doesn't have to stay there, and he's a dragon. So how do you deal with Venom Fang, and how will Venom Fang react to knowing that there's a new wealthy mine near his home? Oh my gosh, don't dragons like shiny things? I'm pretty sure that they do. In fact, I am almost convinced that a dragon would certainly take an interest in a new mine, one that produces magic items, but also wealth and jewels and gold and silver and anything like that. Anything that it can build a treasure hoard around. So there is another complication to deal with, right? So trying to take over the mine. I certainly think that Venom Fang, if he was still alive, would attempt to do so. Raiding the mine's wealth, so that might be just doing hit and run tactics, or as they're bringing stuff out of the mine, or while it's still in the mine. Attacking the mine supplies might be an option too, something that can be done multiple times. It's even possible that, because dragons are quite clever, that they'll decide that Venom Fang will decide that a frontal attack is probably not the most sensible thing to do, and just attacking the supply lines and taking the treasure that's been mined and is being transported to another location. That's still high risk, and maybe Venom Fang decides to dig a great huge hole in the back of the mountain or mine and make his own entrance so he can get in there, set up a lair, and take over the place. Essentially, Venom Fang can become a major villain if he's still around and still alive. Although, even if Venom Fang is not alive, it's possible that a more powerful dragon, if he is alive, could drive him away at later stages if you wanted to, or that a more powerful dragon, now that that Venom Fang is no longer around, might decide to reside in this location, and Wave Echo Cave in that mine looks like a very delicious lair for a much more powerful dragon. So things can get a lot more complicated. Just because you have something of value doesn't mean you get to keep it, because there's going to be people or individuals or monsters or dragons who want to take it from you. Lastly, the last issue and topic that I want to talk about, and that is the one that probably scares the most dungeon masters, just because of its very nature. It's always one of those things that you always can get a little bit concerned about, and it's always around magic items and the amount of magic items you can gain. So the Spell Forge, or the Forge of Spells, essentially allows the player's characters to create magic items. And when characters can make magic items, this is always trouble, unless you know how to manage it. If you are a new dungeon master, it's going to be one of those trial and error issues that you'll find out the hard way. All of us have. There is some information on how the Forge of Spells works on page 48 of the adventure, which I'm just going to turn to now, because I want to read through it and just point out that the designers of the adventure have tried really hard to make sure that they can balance out one, giving the players what they want, which is magic items and the ability to have their own sort of custom magic items, and balance out the effect of having too many show up in the adventure. The problem is it doesn't solve the issues. So I want to read out the section on page 48. The Brazier of Green Flame. Okay? A successful DC 15 intelligence or arcana check identifies the brazier as the source of the magic that suffuses the surrounding caverns. This magic has waned over the years to the extent that it can no longer be harnessed to permanently enchant magic items. So they've put limits on the ability for this location, the Forge of Spells, to make magic items. However, any non-magical weapon or armor bathed or bathing in the green flame for at least 1 minute, which isn't very hard to do, becomes a +1 weapon or a +1 armor, respectively, and it doesn't last a long time. It's only 1d12 hours, so a 12-sided dice worth of hours, and it gives you an indication. See Appendix A. The brazier cannot be removed from the Forge of Spells, so it has to stay there, which means it's limited. It can't be transported to another location. Here's the problem though. One, it does open up the adventure to the option to make temporary magic items. They are temporary, they don't last forever, which is obviously good as far as the Dungeon Master is concerned. The magical effect doesn't last long enough to allow the characters to travel very far before it will wear off. It's going to be at the most 12 hours, and most of the time it's going to take them more than 8 hours. It's going to take them days to get from Phandelver or the mine to another location where they can use the magical effect of whatever they've bathed that weapon or armor in. So it doesn't last very long. The players are absolutely going to ask to try and repair the Forge's magic. I had them ask that question of me, because they're thinking, okay, temporary magic items, not really useful to me unless I stay in this one location, which I don't really want to do. I want to make permanent magic items, and they are going to seek out to try and find a way to repair the magic of the brazier so they can keep making more magic items that are permanent. If they can't do that themselves, they're going to ask to seek out and hire NPCs to make the repairs for them, or to run the forge and then transport things to them as quickly as possible. It gets complicated, as you can see. More than likely, there's going to be a few players that have characters, and they're going to ask to actually use the forge to make their own magic items. They say, look, okay, the brazier's not doing it. My character is proficient with arcana. I can cast magical spells. I can cast the magic weapon spell itself. I'm proficient with smithing tools. I want to make, using the forge that's here, I want to make my own magic items. Now, magic items take a bit of time to make, but you now have essentially a location that seems to have all of the equipment and necessary bits and pieces to do that. They have a forge. It's a magical forge. There's probably going to be tools there. So there is another problem to deal with. They're going to be working towards that. Now you can say, no, it can't be done. But as soon as you block your players from actually making that choice, they're going to see that as the DM locking them out. They're going to see it as a DM dick move. And so far, I found that's exactly the response that my players had with me. And it's one of the reasons why I didn't continue on with the Lost Mine of Phandelver and I started afresh. Because I could see it was going to be an issue for them. And as soon as I open the floodgates to being able to make magic items, it means I have to change the power level of my monsters. It generates quite a lot more work. So how do you manage this yourself? Well, you could do what I did, and that is simply stop your adventure once you get to the conclusion, or you could space it out. You might say, look, the only way you can make magic items that are permanent is if you do it yourself, and you must be proficient with Arcana, you must have the right spells to actually cast onto it, you need to take the required time to do so, and most of the time armor is almost impossible to make because it takes so long to make. If you have a look at the way crafting magic items for armor works, it's just so expensive. Things like weapons, I think it's about 10 days or 21 working days to actually get a magic weapon out, but it's only going to be a +1 weapon. Okay, it's not going to be able to be a +2 or a +3. That just takes too long. So you can build in some restrictions that way. And you might say, look, I'm only giving you this much downtime, and as soon as one of these weapons is created or one of these magic items has been created, and the chances are it won't be armor anyway, you can make something happen. Whether there be attack on Phandalin or the mine itself, but you can't keep doing that. Eventually something's got to give. So I do understand the frustration around the Forge of Spells, because it does create a whole lot of problems, and there doesn't seem to be a satisfactory solution to it. It's almost as if the designers looked at this and said, how can we make it more difficult for you to run the game after you've finished the Lost Mine of Phandelver? Now, somebody might have come up with a better solution than I have, and I certainly hope that they have. That's all I really want to say on the topic. I don't want to say anything more. I think I've said quite enough. So I'm just going to say right now, if you liked this video and you found it informative and useful in some way, or even entertaining, please share and like the video. If you haven't subscribed to my channel and you like this sort of content, please consider subscribing and hitting the bell button to be notified when I go live and when I publish new videos that are pre-recorded. I am now editing down some of my live streams, so you don't have to watch the entire thing if you don't want to. Now, if you want to support my channel, watching this video supported my channel, and thank you very much for sitting around and watching this. I know it's quite long. I've got many more videos on the Lost Mine of Phandelver. There's a playlist, and it's growing consistently pretty much every single week. So you're welcome to go and check that out, and maybe that'll have one of the questions you need answered in there. And if it doesn't, then you're going to let me know what questions need to be answered, and I'll do a video on the topic. I have many other videos, not just on Lost Mine of Phandelver, by the way. I don't do Patreon, but down in the description you'll find affiliate links to the book depository and Amazon, where you can buy stuff online. I get a small commission for whatever you buy through the link that you go through. You don't have to buy the thing I have linked to. You just have to go through the link and then search for whatever you want and then buy that, and I get a small commission. And it lasts for quite some time, particularly if you're going through something like Amazon. Otherwise, don't worry about it. And now, if you have questions and feedback and you just want to say hi, then this is the time to do that. Start typing frantically in the live chat box. Otherwise, if you're not part of the live stream, use the comments section. Down there, I will eventually get to your comments. I've been a little bit busy lately, but I will respond to your comments eventually, provided they're not rude. I think that's reasonable. And hey, till next time, keep rolling those 20s.